I'm waiting for the 0.
Okay.
Okay. Hi, Dan.
Hi, welcome. Glad you came to South France to play with us.
We're here with Dan Winter, and he's you're from Detroit?
Well, Western New York, North Carolina, Detroit.
Okay. He's a scientist, and he teaches sacred geometry and other things. So why don't you introduce us about who you are and where you studied and the things you learned at those times?
Great, but I thought you were going to say what the intended audience here. This is for a radio station in Barcelona, right?
Yeah, that is right.
Tell us about it. Is it Radio FM 91?
90.1 FM in Barcelona. It's called Radio Evolution, and we're doing a science, how do you call that? Like a science program in the radio. So we are a kind of scientific-oriented radio besides all the music. And this is our second interview. The first one was with Vernon Wolf, and this second one is with Dan.
So you're actually creating a distribution around science and consciousness to teach people the scientific understandings of creating a hygiene kind of lifestyle, huh?
Yeah, that's right.
Great. Okay, so you asked me the question about my background and how I was trained, etc. My undergraduate work was electrical engineering at University of Detroit with the Jesuits, and there I was introduced to psychophysiology lab, biofeedback, etc. My graduate professor there was Professor Albert Axe, and in our lab on that polygraph, I was the kind of electrical engineer of the polygraph laboratory in psychophysiology. And that was a lab where we first were able, with Dr. Axe, to discriminate fear and anger in pure electrical terms. So my work was to really model electrical language to describe emotion. At that time, I was then introduced to Elmer Green and Joe Camia, and many of the founders of biofeedback in the United States. So my background made a connection between kind of electrical engineering, my father and grandfather were electricians type of people, and psychology, and psychophysiology, and understanding emotion. And that got me into biofeedback in my current inventions, the heart tuner and the bliss tuner.
That's great.
Next question.
Next question is, okay, a little bit of what is sacred geometry?
What is sacred geometry? A nice, open, general question, but yet very relevant. That is how we became somewhat famous globally, teaching sacred geometry. Sacred geometry ultimately is an introduction to the physics and science of quantum mechanics and how waves travel. Because it's literally true, a wave of charge getting into symmetry is what makes mass and therefore creation. So spiritual creation literally begins with geometry. In science, that's called quantum mechanics is nothing more than a name for symmetry among waves of charge. What's kind of added to that in the traditional word sacred here is the fact that we begin to study how the use of symmetry and geometry creates the sacred in the sense of consciousness. So the effect of geometry on the psychology, the visions you see at death, and those kinds of things. So sacred geometry is also an introduction to sacred architecture, and even psychedelic experiences and near-death experiences. The symmetry map to the mind itself, the spirit.
Okay. What's the next question I could ask?
So what I liked here was that Marco has a background in making a connection between intense, personal, deep, psychological experiences with Salvia Divinorum, is it? Where you began to see these inner passageways and inner geometries of the spirit, where you actually saw these visions, and you somehow became convinced that we needed to teach this to young people. Is that right?
That's right. Not because maybe many people are into this kind of psychedelic experiences, because normally people are very afraid of these kind of experiences because they are so out of the normal. So I really had these experiences, and I wanted to really check what the science was in them. So that's why I've been like kind of investigating everything. And
because we actually originally then published a series of views of what people see when they die. And what people see when they die is, it's called the Clouvet form constants, that the map to the death experience is well known. And that in the death experience people see what's called the Clouvet form constants. They see a grid, a pattern that looks like a grid, and then they see a cobweb, then they see a tunnel, and then they see a spiral. And if we map that in terms of pure language of symmetry rotations, we see it's a map to charge compression adding axes of spin symmetry or rotation. So a grid pattern is literally like a shadow of a cube, a matrix. But then if you, yes, and if you take that cube or matrix, that simple rectilinear grid, and you turn it into a cobweb with a center, that's a view of 5 cubes in a dodecahedron. Creates implosion. And then if you spin that dodecahedron down a helix, you actually map DNA down a slinky. And then if you bring that helix to a point, you see a big cone, a bigger spiral. So all you're doing is learning the axes of rotation to actually begin to see and enter the charge compressing in your own DNA. And that's the point. And that actually is literally what people see when they died. The near-death experiencers in Heinrich Clouvet's Clouvet form constants actually saw the sequence of symmetry operations for the entry into their own DNA as a way to literally use the worm in your genes like a periscope. Very exciting.
So can you explain a little bit more what has phi got to do in all of this, and a little bit so that the audience can know what phi really is?
Well, the golden mean ratio is a geometry that allows waves to converge recursively. In other words, if you need to get an infinite number of waves to converge at one point so they don't fight, you would use the golden mean ratio because it allows the waves to add and multiply constructively. When waves converge, they have to both add and multiply. It's called recursive heterodyning, or recursive or fractal constructive wave interference. The solution to Einstein's problem of infinite non-destructive charge collapse is the golden mean ratio, 0.6180339. If you take that as a sequence of numbers, 0.618, 1, 1.618, 2.618, that progression goes on forever. And in that progression you can add any two numbers and get the next one, or you can multiply any one number times 1.618 to get the next one. For example, 1.618 squared equals 2.618, etc. This is a geometry, the universe is only one, that allows waves to both add and multiply. And that's what they have to do when they interfere, or heterodyne, or make these pretty wave patterns. Lots of pictures. So this becomes the key to DNA, phyllotaxis, phi, filial devotion, divine, fiveness. It's the key to DNA and implosion. It's the key to charge compression, and therefore the key to entering the sacred. It's literally the key to successful death. It's a very important concept. It has as much to do with physics, defining both perception and beauty.
Okay, you were right now talking about gravity. I've read about very nice ideas, nice ideas from you about gravity, and people think that gravity is totally explained, and that's not true, I think. Einstein never did solve that puzzle, and we know that like objects fall to the ground and they fall at a certain speed, so we can get a mathematical formula from that, but we really don't know how the mechanism really works, or why does it work like that, or everything. So
that's the right question. Indeed, it is a profound and important question. We're saying that until we understand the cause of gravity, we will not understand the beginning of the function of DNA for physics.
The thing, when I speak to any of my friends, or to anyone that is minimally, well, that knows a little bit about science or everything, they really think that gravity is solved.
It's really untrue. Physics has no answer at all to the question of why an object falls to the ground. And that's critical, because if we don't know the cause of gravity, we can't know the cause of why DNA has been recently measured making gravity, fabricating the gravity field.
The thing is, when I, for example, try to explain that to someone and he tells me, no, gravity is already shown, no? And Claro, I can't tell him the right explanation for...
Yeah. Go to Wikipedia and type in gravity. And at the bottom it says, the cause of gravity is not understood. Very simple. So physics is pretty arrogant for thinking they can talk about what DNA is for when they don't know the cause of gravity and therefore the cause of DNA making gravity. So physics has a lot to learn. We're saying that physics on this planet really must take a lesson and get humble before they can teach biology how to survive. So let's try to answer the question in very simple terms. What we're saying in the unified field is that Einstein was right that infinite non-destructive charge collapse is the key to the unified field, the solution to gravity. But the only way that charge can collapse infinitely is if the electric field of that charge changes from compression of charge into the acceleration of charge. So if we look at what's happening in DNA, for example, in the top-down view, you have 10 spirals in DNA. Let's just take a look at a little visual here. That if we took a view of DNA, where you see from the top, you see 10 spirals looking down. Let's see if you can you zoom in on this screen there, Valerie? That'd be great, huh? If you look at what's happening in DNA, that DNA is taking the spirals of charge entering the top view of DNA. Just one moment, let's see if we can get this picture up here. And those 10 spirals, which is how charge is entering DNA, are adding and multiplying their phase velocities and turning the compression into acceleration. So here we have a lovely picture. This is the 10 spirals looking from the top-down view of DNA on the right on your screen there. And what's happening in these waves is they're adding and multiplying the phase velocity of the charge. Since all living proteins are five-sided, like DNA, this is a view of every protein that's alive. It's making charge implode, and that access to gravity from voltage is the cause of life. So what's happening in this geometry is that a portion of the inertia of these waves of charge, as they enter DNA, are adding and multiplying, not just their wavelength by Golden ratio, but adding and multiplying their phase velocity, the speed of the wave front. And as the wave velocities add and multiply, the charge compression becomes charge acceleration. The result is that a portion of that charge that entered as voltage, as an electric field, has been pushed through the speed of light at the center of DNA, and providing a path out through the speed of light for charge, like pulling the plug in your bathtub, creating suction. That suction for charge through the speed of light is called gravity. So gravity happens because the self-similarity optimized by Golden ratio allows charge to go through the speed of light at center. That essentially means that that gravity is called the G-ray of Vita. The G is how the circle meets the line. It essentially means that self-similarity is the cause of gravity because only fractality or self-similarity allows infinite charge collapse. Now, we absolutely know in physics that fractality is the only infinite compression. We also know that Golden mean ratio is the key to fractality. You can even superpose the Mandelbrot set on the top of that picture of the dodecahedron, the pentacles. And if you look at it even a little closer, you see that in Moon's work in the University of Chicago Chemistry Department, the symmetry of the platonic solids of the atoms. Do you want to grab that little blue model? Can you just maybe reach up there and grab that blue model while we do this? The symmetry of, careful with that. Yeah, just be a little gentle. That the symmetry of the neutrons and the protons of the nucleus nest in exactly the symmetry of the platonic solids. Beautiful, beautiful. So we just take this model. We see inside here in green, let's see if you can see that. In green in the center, you can just barely see it there, you have a star tetra cube, yeah? Now, if you look in the outside of that model, the way that green cube is nested in the center, this is two green tetra making this outer blue-edged cube right here, and the outer edges of that cube, this is the white ball, which is the vertex edge of a cube, is nested in this dodecahedron right here. This is a dodecahedron. I have my fingers on the two edges of here, yeah? And then if I zoom out, if you zoom out some there, you see the way that dodecahedron is nested in this icosahedron with the yellow vertex here. And the icosahedron, if we extend those edges straight out, creates this big outer dodecahedron here. Zoom out all the way, yeah? Notice that there's a hex view to this, and then there's a pent view to this. 510 and a 612 view. Now it turns out that the platonic solids, this nest, what we call a star mother because it's how gravity is made, is literally, in chemistry, precisely the geometry of the hadrons, the protons and neutrons that make a nucleus. They nest in this manner, specifically and exactly. That's Moon's work, University of Chicago.
And the electron?
21st Century Magazine. Yes. And at the electron shell level, the SPDF subshell, the S subshell is one vortex pair torus. The pi, suborbital P, is cubic tetracube. And the D and F are 1014 electron dodecaecosa. So the electrons are self-similar to the neutrons, the nucleus. That means the inside is self-similar to the outside. The cause of gravity in the atom is self-similarity. Hello! This is what I choose to teach to physics because self-similarity is the cause of gravity. Now we can begin to understand how that recursive fractal charge collapse is causing charge acceleration at center, squirting charge through the speed of light in the center of your DNA, called getting a soul. So Gergiev, Peter Gergiev, comes to our conference, his team comes to our conference in Budapest to present the results of their physics, having recently measured DNA making more gravity. Phantom DNA, black holes in DNA, quantum DNA. DNA, a molecular electric field maker, is in the business of making gravity. This is important information. And our physics people should be embarrassed that they don't understand this. It's not that I'm smart, it's that physics on this planet is primitive and stupid. I know maybe I'm not a diplomat in this regard, but it's so horrible because that means our genetic engineers don't have a clue of the function of DNA. DNA needs a fractal charge environment to absorb charge in order to be fed. That explains why seeds germinate in sacred space, trees and stones, and seeds die if you put them in metal cages, modern buildings. It's a sin, and it's caused by the stupid physicists on our planet not knowing what DNA is for. So yes, color me angry. Yes, okay. So I carry on. Next question.
Let me see.
Why don't we just take a quick pause here. So we're going to do just a little zoom into this model. This is called the animation of the physics of the Holy Grail, the real science of the Grail, which is fractal charge in blood DNA. And we're looking at the side view now of that approach to charge down that cone. This is that same view. This is 10 golden mean spirals, exactly the physics of the top-down view of DNA. So if we look at that from the side, we see that this 60-degree cone here, that's a conic angle. That's an implosion cone right there. Yeah, that angle is the angle comprised by these 10 spirals of the golden mean. If now I remove the donuts, the toroidal field domains, and I just see them from the side view, I see that there's an infinite number of dodecaecosa in this geometry. So if I take this golden mean spiral, which is the charge path into DNA, and you see how it's a caduceus, and it looks like a pine cone, pineal, pining, literally getting screwed. If I revolve that golden spiral from the side view to the top view, you see it makes a cup within a cup. That's called the Holy Grail. And that's the real physics of the Holy Grail, which is in the blood. It's DNA's ability to make this fractal cup within a cup that can hold an infinite amount of spin, never runs over, contains the golden spiral, the Sufi heart with wings, the feminine reproductive organs, the perfect Valentine, and you could zoom in forever and always recursively, infinitely see the same thing. And if you were to revolve that cup within a cup, you would see that you could zoom in forever from any angle of approach in 3 dimensions and always recursively see the same thing. So it's a three-dimensional fractal. First you think you're outside, then you're inside out, and you solve the problem of separateness. Do you see that the swastika was just a model for charge compression? So this is the meaning of the Holy Grail. It does explain all of the mythology. You can zoom out now, yeah? It does explain all of the mythology. I mean, the stories of Arthur, the Ark on the Taurus, and the stories of Merlin, the Merovingian bloodline, the story of Mog. Mog means to tower, Migdala, and this is precisely what the charge field of your blood does when it implodes with charge. So yes, it's good to study the Holy Grail, but only if it helps you learn the science to help you make the choices, which are the hygiene to ignite your blood with charge, called bliss, the physics of enlightenment.
Okay, and should you talk us a little about what's this hygiene?
Yes, so the issue of the hygiene, and that's why we say you don't need to imply to people that they need to study the physics to have bliss. Not true. You need to study the physics only enough to understand the basic science, which is that your blood, your DNA, and your body is not going to grow up, get immortal, absorb charge, unless you learn about this fractality, so you can make practical choices. Just to introduce the hygiene conversation, what we say is that when your body absorbs a lot of charge, the aura grows measurably. That fits spirituality beautifully, but now we can teach that with science. We have GDV, gas discharge visualization, the medical Kirlian photograph. We know the physics that when you have bliss, your halo gets big, except medicine calls that the gas discharge visualization. It's a Kirlian photograph. So this is one example among many that in fact your charge field can become immortal. The same physicist, Karatkov in Russia, who measured the medically diagnostic aura, is the one who measured successful death. You could read about it on the website soulinvitation.com/death. Successful death is measurable. It's very simple. It means that your DNA prepares all your biologic memories for charge compression. They're then accelerated, and they can unpack non-destructively. Much better if you're in a fractal environment. The ancients used Machu Picchu, Amarna, Solomon's Temple. These are solar fractal capacitors. The little hill, fractal to the mountain behind it, sacred burial ground, the place to die. Non-destructive charge unpacking is a place where you could have successful death. So the hygiene for these things has everything to know about the physics of charge and has nothing to do with miracle worship or personality worship, which is pure crap for kids. It's okay if you want to teach these fairy tale stories about religion, but they're boring once you learn a little bit of the science, because the science is self-empowering. So that's just the beginning of the answer to your question. The concept then is that your charge field gets sustainable electrically. Ka is your boat to the underworld in Egypt. It became our word kafar and Catholic. The Ka is the amount of coherence in your biologic capacitive field. And when that becomes sustainable, you can lucid dream and take memory through death and go through the sun. Otherwise, you're toast. Two choices, very simple. Total death or immortality based on a coherent electric field. The problem is, anybody who's stupid enough to believe that their spiritual immortality is different than the physics of a coherent electric field. Hello, I got news for you, all of the schizophrenic scientists on planet Earth, that spiritual immortality and the coherence of an electric charge field are the same thing. This is important information. Otherwise, we have schizophrenia. Sorry, but it's just pretty stupid to watch it after a while. Because then they would know that you don't go into a hospital to die because the electric field's there enough to scramble an egg. They're horrible. What you need is biologic architecture. Architecture that looks like biology, so it'll compress charge. Architecture made of the same material and looking like a pine cone is the perfect place to die. The modern hospital is hell. I mean, if you want to define hell, take a modern hospital. It's an electrical description of hell because they don't know what life is, so obviously they can't maintain life. We just made a new film on biologic architecture, soulinvitation.com/architecture. So I carry on, but now your question. Your question is the hygiene.
My question was the hygiene. Well, yeah, carry on.
Yeah. Well, what we say is that at some point you recognize that the only way to create immortality is to do the science to achieve bliss, ecstasy, peak experience. Where bliss, ecstasy, peak experience, enlightenment, peak performance, peak perception, whatever you want to call it, is well defined in science, and that science is, even from Karatkar's work, your aura gets bigger, more fractal, your brain waves achieve golden ratio, the bliss tuner, etc., that you achieve charge acquisition. Compressed charge, physics calls that creation. So the ability to compress charge is the ability to acquire bliss and peak experience. We divide practically in science the hygiene to do that in 4 categories. The first is diet. Eat live food, live enzymes, 50 to 80% live food, raw food. Do not eat angry DNA. 99% of the wheat, corn, and soy on planet Earth are angry because of monoculture. Monoculture makes DNA angry because of lack of genetic diversity. It loses fractality and implosion, and therefore becomes stupid DNA. So the white shit they put in your white bread, that angry wheat, is stupid DNA because it can't implode anymore. It's not fractal enough to attract charge. So don't eat that stuff. It's poison. It causes mucus. It makes a rubber inner tube in your intestines. It's shit. Wheat, corn, and soy should be avoided because the DNA is pissed off. And you'd be pissed off too if your grandfather's father's father had been in jail for 100 generations. That's what monoculture is. It's a horrible thing. So you go into the grocery store, your bio co-op, and you're dousing. Valerie, maybe you could just center that a little bit, if you would. Yeah? You're in your store, and you're dousing to see if the last time the DNA has experienced genetic diversity. Yeah? Access to genetic diversity is what allows DNA to get intelligent. It's literally fractality. So that is what makes DNA happy. You got 10 different colors of heirloom seeds, open pollinated beans, corn, etc. And in your garden, you have a stone circle, a labyrinth. Everything that compresses charge into DNA makes it happy. That's what you need to eat. Live food, high quality DNA, drink only spring water and fresh squeezed, avoid all fried food, all red meat, all alcohol, tobacco, stimulants, all that stuff. And simply get your body charged. And that's the way to get toward immortality. So first category was diet. Second category was environment. You need to run, not walk, out of metal cities with electrosmog and noise. Because metal cities with electrosmog and noise kill the souls of your children. Sorry, they're a mistake. Whoever invented them should apologize. No, you need nature. You need charge density. Silence and charge-dense nature are the only way to get your DNA ignited. And the ancient Anunnaki knew that. And they went to caves and stone circles. And they avoided metal structures. Yeah? Third category was the kinesthetic, was the movement, the yoga, the dance, the sacred gymnastic. Simply put, if you build the inner muscles to move your aura with strength, you can eventually move a capacitive field that stores a lot of inertia, like lightning. That Tai Chi master pushing you over with their Dantian is the physics of your charge focus moving an electric field coherently. The physics of attention is fractal charge compression. So,
okay, so basically we have the diet, the exercise, and the environment.
Yep.
Okay, but really these 3 things are, I think, very hard to accomplish because we're masked with cities and everyone's living there, and is it the only way? I suppose it is, and how it's like kind of hard because people already do or try to do the hygiene in the cities, you know, like practicing their yoga and eating like bio food, but they don't really know where it's gotten from. So I don't know.
Well, the other aspect of that is that every time you think about a pure principle, the electric circuit you make in the hologram of your brain becomes more recursive. Because pure principle is something which is so resonant electrically that it makes a bigger electric field.
Like, for example, love.
if you were thinking about love or pure physics or pure wave symmetry, you're visualizing something like a rose. If you sat there and visualized a rose with enough focus, you would store an electric field, and you'd begin to measure that electric field grow around your body. Because you're inviting charge to compress. And eventually you store in more and more of that charge, and that's what creates biologic immortality.
And the question, very important, is what is biologic immortality?
Biologic immortality is... Well, let me tell you what it's not. It's not egotistical. It's not escapist. It's not vain. It's not even religious dogma. It's none of those things. Biologic immortality is the recognition that the only thing that is sustainably emerging from biology is the charge field that comes out of your body, even at the moment of death or lucid dream, which inhabits the electric field of all of DNA, something called the collective unconscious by Jung, which we now know is the amount of coherence in the charge field that your blood makes. And that eventually becomes a cocoon which can go through the heart of the sun. So the physics appears to be that the ability to get all biologic information compressed well, precisely the business DNA is in at the moment of death, that ability to get all biologic memories, electric field of charge, compressed and accelerated well in the center of DNA at the moment of death, that is the key to biologic immortality. Because the ability to ride that electric field, which is like riding a donut-shaped charge bubble, and that the foci of charge implosion at the center of your donut is your attention. And the ability to ride that through the center of your DNA and then eventually through the center of the sun is the only way out of here. Hello? It's not escapist. It's not egotistical. It's not pure spiritual dogma. No, it's simple physics. The only way out of here is in a charge bubble made by DNA that eventually makes enough gravity to become and go through the sun, what the ancestors called the sun god. We have hundreds of women who know this experience. They know what the center of the sun looks like. They know it functions as an organ of perception. It's quite real. It's cool and inviting. It's an eyeball. These things are very possible. So we need to recognize this in physics and understanding what survives death is a coherent charge field. And that's sustainable. So we have this idea that ego is a bad thing, which is pure crap. The fact is that ego is a name for identifying correctly the part of your electric field that's sustainable. Yes? So I have a lot of ego around the question of what is the pure principle of what makes this charge field sustainable. If I can think a shareable thought, I know perfectly well that the lightning that attracts to my body makes me immortal. Does that make me an egotist? No. Does that make me someone who understands the physics of charge embedding? Yes. Does that make me someone who understands how tornadoes get steered by a shaman? Yes. So it's appropriate to have an ego the size of the sun when you understand the physics.
Okay. Okay, so all that you have explained can be practiced with your heart tuner?
The heart tuner and the bliss tuner system were a biofeedback environment that I invented to allow me to invent the word heart coherence as it's described in the literature now. The HeartMath Institute incorrectly used my invention and misdefined the word heart coherence. Heart coherence is the amount of internal phase coherence made by your EKG as measured by the cepstrum. And you can see that your heart coherence sings like a laser when you feel love. It's very measurable. And so coherent emotion became teachable, and then it made empathy teachable. You can measure when two hearts phase lock, and then later we were able to measure heart rate variability, the low frequencies of the breathing, and we see when two people's heart rate variability phase locks, you have a second distinct way to measure and teach empathy, which makes spiritual healing possible, energy healing possible, makes tantra teachable, makes peacemaking and marriage counseling teachable. Powerful tool. The bliss tuner is a device that does brainwave spectrum analysis, and following the Russian work we saw that enlightenment, bliss, peak experience occur when the brain waves create this golden ratio cascade. We have cross-hemispheric coherence, and then golden ratio between the alpha and the beta. You have this condition where the whole body switches, becomes fractal, and that's literally the physics of bliss. So yes, we have a wonderful biofeedback environment to teach this. You can see this at our website, goldenmean.info or soulinvitation.com. Yeah.
Fantastic. Can you tell us a little bit about the relationship between sacred geometry or Phi and the Mayan calendars?
About the Mayan calendar. I have enjoyed the work of Maurice Cotterell, the work of Jose Argüelles and others, many who are writing about 2012 and the Mayan calendar. My personal opinion is the reason for studying the Maya was a pretty indirect way to learn about solar physics. And solar physics is mostly a way to learn about the symmetry of fusion. So, for example, the fact that the center of the Mayan calendar is the pattern of the codons of DNA in I Ching, 64, is telling you the sun is spitting out magnetic donuts in the geometry to wake up DNA. And it's telling us that the sun is about to have her orgasm in time with a galactic wind, which causes the sun to require the experience of compression. So we say that 2012 is not the sun wanting to toast most of the DNA on Earth, but rather 2012 is the sun saying, any DNA that cannot get fractal cannot be saved. If the gene pool of Earth cannot make the gravity to steer radioactivity and to steer the sun, then the DNA cannot be saved. It's not worth saving. It's not able to be saved. We've measured several times. Focused human attention reduces radioactivity. Uri Geller's measurements. We've measured that focused children singing 1 million at once will change the solar flares. We know we can make the gravity to steer our sun. We know why. The restoration of fractality is what ends radioactivity and holds the atom together. And indeed, the ability to enter our own sun is requirement for the graduation of gene pools. It would be stupid for a scientist to think that solar systems go to such a lot of trouble to make gene pools if gene pools didn't have some output that fed solar systems. It's quite obvious. That output is the creating of the coherent gravity bubble that holds suns together. And that's precisely what group bliss makes, is coherent gravity making. It's what the shaman and the Maya called the dream spell. The dream spell is the amount of coherence you make when you have coherent charge around your body, which is the physics of bliss, really. So, yes, the Mayan calendar is fun, but it's only an introduction to solar physics, Maurice Cotterell, and the solar physics is only an introduction of fusion, of charge implosion, which is really bliss science. Yeah?
Okay.
Maybe we just take a pause, huh?
Okay. If we have perception in the middle of perfect compression, we are already there. So how is it that we can't see more than 4 dimensions if we are self-conscious?
Yeah, we've been using too many psychological terms imprecisely from the real science of perception. First, let's say what perception is. Perception is the ability to sort waves of charge into phase because of implosive fractal compression. For example, you sit under a sacred tree and you notice that your vision gets lots more clear. The physics is because the electric field of that tree is more fractal, vision clarifies. So vision is the ability to charge implode waves to bring them to center where they're sorted into phase. And that ability to sort waves into phase is called perception. That's why the physics of beauty and the physics of perception are the same, optimized by golden ratio self-similarity. Now, look what's happening in the center of DNA. In the center of DNA you have the cube, 3 spin rotations, and then in the dodeca, 4th axis of spin of the cube. And then you take the dodeca down a helix, and you have 5 rotations in the thread of DNA, 5 dimensions, yeah? Now down the center of that wormhole, that thread, you then braid recursively that thread into string, and the string into rope, and the rope into fat rope. The 7th time you recursively braid that thread into something fatter, it becomes a donut, a torus, circular DNA, toroidal DNA, called the Lord of the Ring. And the implosion in the center of there is gravity-making and implosive and shoots charge to the speed of light. And keeping that tornado going is called a soul invitation. Soulinvitation.com, etc. So, and that's why some people say, 12 strands DNA, which is crap. The fact is 12 superposed axes of charge rotation, 5 in the thread, and 7 more rotations, codifying the 7 spins of the tetra, in the DNA, which was called boson 7 at Montauk, predicting who could time travel, and called chloridians, microchloridians in DNA in Star Wars. It predicted who could be accelerated in their DNA and make gravity in their DNA. And this was the physics of getting your perception, your concentric electric field focused. So what you see as your own vision is the ability to ride a wave of electric charge that's imploding through a torus donut. That's the physics. And what you're calling dimension is the number of superposed axes of rotation of charge possible in any symmetry system, which specifically always shows up in the spectrum analysis. That's why in the EKG you get more harmonics when you have bliss or have love, ascension. And in DNA you can spectrum analyze when you see the 7th superposed rotations called boson 7. You can tell in advance who could time travel. It's simply phase discipline, coherence of charge in DNA, and it's what this planet needs to know if we're to survive.
Well, when you say time travel, like everything is connected, no? Already, like we live in present, but it's
remember,
like...
time is only a name for rotation. Very simple. You rotate charge, you measure that inertia, that's called mass. So creation is rotation. Simple. You check the rate, you measure that rotation, and you call that time. So here, now we have charge rotation equals mass, charge rotation equals time. Hello? So when you accelerate charge to the speed of light, the center of a torus, like in DNA, obviously the only place to go? Time travel. It means you could get here before we got here next year. It's all about rotation. So that's why if you want miracles, synchronicity, saints in your life, you need to inhabit both a fractal in space and a fractal in time. Read the book Spiral Calendar. It's quite clear. Key event histories fit a golden mean spiral in time. It's because the fractality is the only path out of chaos in both space and time.
Incredible. Vale. Okay. So we were talking before about fractals, and I wanted to know, or you to clarify, why are some things more fractal than others, and what is exactly a fractal?
Fractality is very simple to understand. I would say fraction of the all. But fractality means anything where the inside looks like so much like the outside that you could zoom in forever infinitely or infinitely. Visualize a rose, a pine cone, a fern, an onion. Something where the inside looks like the outside. Our Grail cup, for example. This is the geometry of infinite non-destructive compression, the geometry of infinite collapse. And in fractality, you have what's called scale invariance. And when waves get scale invariance, it means they can be compressed without being destroyed. And that's the key to getting immortal in your DNA. So, for example, if you remember something about love, that pattern is literally such that it can be squeezed infinitely and not get hurt. And that ability to be squeezed infinitely and not get hurt prepares waves to become infinitely connected. And that's why everything in nature obeys golden mean ratio and fractality. That's why every living protein is 5-sided based on golden mean. That's why DNA, Earth grid, and zodiac are a phi golden ratio based pentagonal dodecahedron. Phi. The reason is because charge needs to move between scales by perfect ratio. It's called scalar or torsional or implosive. All these stupid names we have for this simple physics that if charge cannot implode, the wave is not sustainable. So obviously atoms have to have the same geometry as galaxies. Look, let's see, a growing fetus has the same geometry as the spiral of golden mean in DNA and the same spiral as the spiral of galaxies. Hello? What's the reason? The reason is called self-awareness. The only path out of chaos is fractal, optimized by golden ratio. The only angle at which a wave can non-destructively self-re-enter, golden mean spiral, defines self-awareness. The ability to self-refer is the ability to become self-aware. Simple example, try it, you'll feel it. You look at your own hand and focus intently, particularly when you're ready to lucid dream and wake up in your dream and wake up at death. So you're focused in your hand, and this engages a tightening tornado, slipknot, recursive, self-reentrant golden spiral on the toroidal homunculus map of the body on the brain surface, fractal, and that tightening slipknot of charge, the physics of Kundalini, yeah, on the brain surface, is caused because of the fact that you looked at your own hand. The electricity of self-reference tightened that tornado, and as that tornado implodes, you notice, oh, I just woke up inside my dream. Oh, now I'm taking memory through death. Oh, now I am self-aware because I was able to self-refer. And that's pure electrical symmetry physics.
Lucid dreaming?
Lucid dreaming could be defined generally as ability to travel somewhere and come back and check to see that you brought something real with you. A lucid dream is one where you met someone and the memory was agreed by more than one person. A lucid dream is a dream where you experience something which is later testable. Lucid dreaming is about the only test for successful death. If you want to die successfully, you must practice lucid dreaming. And the physics is teachable.
Well, that's what Castaneda...
Precisely. Castaneda's place of power is a place of charge compression, defining the sacred. Measurable where the most harmonics arrive at a capacitor. So the spectrum analysis of a capacitor is the way to define sacred.
Okay.
In the same way we measure life force. Yeah, have we had fun yet? Gee, we did all the fun stuff, huh?
Yeah, I think this is already...
Okay.
Yeah.
There's a huge amount on the website. All the informations are at soulinvitation.com and goldenmean.info. It's delightful that you're bringing this to the Spanish audience in Barcelona and elsewhere. We'd like to share this with our Mexico City group, and we're working with Jorge and Pilar to come to Barcelona in a few months. So maybe we'll see you there. We'll put all the links on the website.
We'll be there. Thank you very much, Dan.
Thank you. Okay.